Dear coronavirus, we're writing to tell you that we've had enough.
People are dying of COVID-19.
You came for us, so we're coming for you. Sure, you locked us down, but you also rallied us to a cause. When you were just getting started, we got right to work. We joined the White House Coronavirus Task Force and helped 32 states get up and running with COVID-19 testing early on. As a partner in Operation Warp Speed, we manage logistics for clinical trials to help accelerate vaccine and therapy pipelines. When you caused panic that depleted PPE in hospitals, we answered the call from FEMA and got a national stockpiling program up and running within weeks to help protect our country's frontline workers. While you've driven people apart, we've helped bring them together to join in this fight. We connect our partner COVID-19 lab to providers and their patients, so it's easier to make testing more widely available across the country. While you've infected millions of people, by the end of this year, we'll have helped protect billions by delivering life-saving vaccines. Even the fragile ones that need to go great distances at ultra-low temperatures. Because while you like to heat things up, we help cool them down with one of the most extensive end-to-end cold chain networks on Earth. You think you can move fast? Well, we can move faster with 99.9% on-time performance. And yes, we can go airborne too if it means getting a critical therapy to a patient in need. And know this, coronavirus, we will not stop. As you evolve, we'll support new trials, deliver more PPE, and help get even more vaccines and therapies to market. We'll work tirelessly to support humanitarian relief efforts in lower-income nations where help is needed most. Whatever you bring, we'll continue to fight to bring the world hope, with innovation, agility, speed, and a great deal of heart. Because we believe that together, we can do anything. We are UPS Healthcare.
Disasters aren't new to Filipinos. Typhoons, earthquakes, flood, surely we all have experienced these. And through the years, we have witnessed Filipinos rise above and take control of their lives again. But this year, our lives took a huge turn as COVID-19 swept across not just the Philippines, but the entire planet. In just a few months, how we run our lives, businesses, and organizations changed in ways we didn't expect. Now, do we have what it takes to face the new normal head-on? Yes, because PDRF's iAdapt is here to help you be ready and resilient to any disaster that may come your way. iAdapt, which means Innovations Academy for Disaster Awareness, Preparedness, and Training, is PDRF's e-learning solution that aims to equip Filipinos with the right set of tools, skills, and resources they need to be confidently ready to face any type of disaster. So what's in it for you? Let's take a tour. iAdapt's easy-to-use interface allows you to navigate through our library of self-paced, interactive training and courses that are developed by industry experts on disaster risk reduction and management, business continuity, and climate change adaptation. Each course is designed with a blended learning approach. This means you can boost your knowledge and skills through various information-rich e-learning formats such as videos, webinars, interactive modules, microsites, quizzes, and more. Communication is critical to learning, and through iAdapt, you can talk with or get feedback from your course facilitators. Moreover, you can share your insights and create solutions with your co-learners in our forums. To make your experience even more rewarding, your learning will be gamified. With iAdapt, you can gain points and badges as you progress through the courses. And once you successfully complete a course, you will receive a certificate that you can include in your resume. With iAdapt, you can now build your disaster resilience anytime, anywhere. What are you waiting for? Sign up now at iadapt.pdrf.org and take charge of your safety and resilience. iAdapt, the online academy for disaster resilience in the new normal.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, what a wonderful video from the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. Good afternoon. I'm Ferosa from the AHA Center. And thank you very much for joining us in the Humanitarian and Emergency Logistic Innovation Expo in this beautiful afternoon. This session will be hosted by the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation as well as UPS. Without further ado, I would not steal the spotlight. I will share the floor to Camille. Camille?
Thanks very much, Ferosa. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camille from the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. Again, welcome to Logistics Beyond, Multi-sectoral Engagements of the Private Sector During the Pandemic. We're very excited to share this session with you. And before we begin, I'd like to just remind you of a few Zoom house rules. So if we look at the slide that's being presented on screen at the moment, please note that all your microphones and cameras are automatically turned off as you enter the session. If you have any questions for our speakers and panelists, please do maximize the Q&A box, which you can find in the middle portion of your screen. Make your questions concise and direct, and later for specific panelists, you must include the name and the question. By joining this activity, you are agreeing to participate in a recorded webinar that will be posted on UPS and PDRF platforms, such as websites, social media pages, and others. Please note that this recording is purely for documentation purposes only. Once again, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are going to actually be exploring the different ways in which various actors and organizations are able to cope with the challenges of the pandemic. We would like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon session, the Chief Resilience Officer of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, Mr. Guillermo Billuz, as he gives us the context for our discussions this afternoon. Over to you, Sir Bill.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, Camille, for the introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this ASEAN Forum Focus Session. Our session this afternoon will be on logistics beyond multi-sectoral engagements in the private sector during the pandemic, and it's brought to you by PDRF and UPS. We'll be speaking primarily about our experience at the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, or PDRF, from 2020 to the present. This pandemic has been a crisis like no other. It brought us a host of new and complex challenges, but also some interesting opportunities. One, we had to learn to deal with simultaneous or concurrent disasters, think typhoon and pandemic. Second, these disasters presented short and long duration crises, forcing us to be flexible and agile. Third, the pandemic forced us to work virtually most of the time. We had to work remotely from each other. And fourth, we all had to make sure humanitarian workers were well protected against COVID-19. Business shutdowns, quarantine measures added complexity to the response. At the center of it all was the requirement for good logistics and supply chain management. This is something we will all continue to need, and something that we'll be focused on in this discussion. So here's just a very quick rundown of what we've had to go through in the Philippines. First, we opened the year with the Taal eruption in January 2020. Next slide. With that, we began with COVID. We started our Alaga Kay Juan campaign for COVID for frontliners, for health frontliners, delivering food to all our health frontliners right from the start of the COVID lockdown. And then, at the same time, we started a very large-scale feeding program, Project Ugnayan, to try to work through a feeding program to service 1 million families within the Metro Manila area. And then our thanks to UPS, we were also able to bring in 40 metric tons of medical grade fabric for the industry, for the PPE manufacturing industry in the Philippines. And then at the same time, we began to open up Project Kaagapay together with Zuellig Family Foundation, Zuellig Pharma, and other partners. And we started a very big fund campaign to raise money for PPEs, for ventilators, for tests, and for medical supplies for our healthcare frontliners. And then by the end of the year, we began to experience very large-scale typhoons, particularly towards the end of the year, November, Ulysses and Raleigh. And so again, we had to resort to our traditional operations for typhoon relief. So we've had an extremely busy year, and at the center of it all was logistics. And I can't overemphasize how important this was for us to be able to perform our jobs this year. So now we're going to proceed to the next part of the program, where we will tackle different organizations' initiatives and best practices during the pandemic. We're privileged to have representatives in different sectors who will be presenting their programs and policies that they implemented during this time. Again, mixing and being agile and being flexible with respect to both the pandemic and traditional disasters that we face in the Philippines. Our first speaker will focus on the latest developments in the Philippine Logistics Master Plan, among other things. Director Bernardo Rafaelito Alejandro IV is the Operations Service Director from the Office of Civil Defense and has been working with OCD for more than 2 decades and has been involved in the management of multiple complex crises during his extensive career. PDRF has had the pleasure of working together with Director Rafi, as he is better known to all of us, during traditional types of natural disasters, and we work with him frequently also during the pandemic period. So let me turn us all over to Director Rafi to present, his work at OCD. Director Rafi.
Thank you, Sir Bill, our partner from PDRF, who is the moderator for this afternoon session, and to the members of the panel, and to the participants of this session this afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm here to present to you the Philippines Logistics Response Plan and the role of the private sector plays during disaster response operations. To start off, I would like to give everybody a brief background on the Philippine DRRM environment. With the enactment of Republic Act 10121, the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Framework was born, focusing in the key thematic areas of disaster management, namely disaster prevention and mitigation, disaster preparedness, disaster response, and disaster rehabilitation and recovery. As we move further and gain more understanding in DRRM, we are envisioning a paradigm shift that will tilt our collective efforts more into prevention and mitigation. This will promote sustainable resiliency and the prevention of loss of lives, damage to property and livelihood, and economic loss. For now, as I discuss more about our National Logistics Plan, I will focus more on disaster response. With Republic Act 10121's enactment, the National Disaster Coordinating Council was transformed into the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or the NDRRMC. The Council developed the National Disaster Response Plan, or the NDRP. It is, in its very essence, the NDRP is the country's multi-hazard response plan. It is the government's strategic action plan in providing response assistance for managing the effects of hazards in the Philippines. It highlights the roles and responsibilities of the member agencies in times of disasters and the coordination mechanisms or tools that serves as guide during response operations. Shown are the photos that highlight some of the key activities of the NDRRMC during disaster response operations. We at the NDRRMC perform multifaceted approaches in addressing humanitarian issues on the ground and the consequence management operations brought about by the effects of disasters. Part of the strategies highlighted in the NDRP is the use of the response cluster approach. Mirrored after the UN cluster system, the NDRRMC response cluster is the disaggregation of the national government agencies' operational and technical capabilities, grouping them in separate clusters based on their common expertise to unify efforts in providing emergency relief and solving humanitarian issues in times of disasters. Part of the NDRRMC response is the logistics cluster, who is tasked to ensure swift and appropriate logistics intervention to support the operations of the members of the clusters. It serves as the backbone and service provider for the responders and humanitarian workers. As stipulated in the NDRP, the OCD is tasked to lead the logistics cluster. As such, OCD coordinates the logistics operations in order to synchronize the efforts of all concerned actors. On its activation, the cluster will provide efficient and effective emergency logistics services for all clusters in disaster-affected areas. The cluster focuses on 4 pillars of emergency logistics, namely transportation, supplies and inventory, warehousing, and infrastructure and utilities. The transportation subcluster is tasked to provide swift, efficient, and effective transportation services to other clusters and relevant stakeholders for their transportation requirement using air, land, and sea channels. The supplies and inventory subcluster is tasked to provide assistance on the tracking, management, and monitoring of valuable and finite response supplies and inventory. The warehousing subcluster shall provide assistance in the provision of appropriate warehouses and storage facilities needed for the processing and safekeeping of relief goods and materials to ensure the serviceability of deployed assets. Lastly, the infrastructure and utilities subcluster is tasked to provide swift restoration assistance, such as restoration assistance to basic lifelines damaged by disasters, such as water, power, communication, and road accessibility to affected areas. In general, the cluster pulls together all available assets and synchronizes the actions of relevant organizations in times of disasters. This will optimize the use of all available resources in providing logistics services to all stakeholders. We have been formulating the National Logistics Cluster Plan that will fully implement the developed strategies and protocols in humanitarian emergency, logistics, and supply chain. Relatedly, the logistics cluster also gets support from the private sector. The private sector complements the existing logistics cluster assets and augments the cluster's capacity, multiplying its reach and support to affected areas. The private sector, through its corporate social responsibility, has been generous to the logistics cluster's operations and have, in numerous occasions, filled in the gaps in resources, technical capability, personnel, and equipment of the cluster. We envision that through the National Logistics Cluster Plan, the partnership and participation of the private sector, volunteer groups, civil society organizations, and other NGOs strengthen and be more unified in future disaster response operations. Currently, we are in the final steps in institutionalizing the National Logistics Cluster Plan. The following are the identified roles in the private sector in terms of emergency logistics. First, to promote a single representation for all private organizations. At this point, it is the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, or PDRF, who serves as the point of contact and connects with OCD to manage private sector support in logistics management. Second, create a living directory, inventory, or of available service offered by the private sector. This inventory serve as augmentation to the current logistics capabilities of the government in times of disasters. Third, assist in the restoration, repair, and rehabilitation of damaged infrastructures, especially private facilities that provide basic services to affected population. Fourth, documentation and reporting of all actions taken by private organizations and other volunteer entities outside the government for information management and records keeping. And last, ensure seamless interlink and connectivity with the NDRMC Emergency Operations Center. I would like to stress out that the private sector, through the PDRF, the Philippines' major private sector vehicle and coordinator for disaster management, has been actively supporting the NDRRMC in promoting national resiliency. We partnered with PDRF in strengthening the country's logistics capacity. The NDRRMC shares timely and relevant information to the PDRF through our Emergency Operations Centers, or EOC, to synchronize our activities during disaster response operations. I could not discuss emergency logistics without tackling our response initiative during the COVID-19. This pandemic has disrupted everyone's way of living. And for us in the field of DRRM, our disaster management activities. OCD is tasked to lead the task group resource management and logistics of our country's task force against COVID-19. We have broken down our key functions as follows. Resource management, the procurement of essential PPEs, test kits, and other needed medical supplies and hospital equipment. We also develop a supply chain management system where we can keep track of our movement of inventory in our central warehouse. In logistics management, we focus primarily in the transportation of key commodities and delivery to recipients, warehouse management and storage, and inventory management. On donations management, we process, accept, and deliver domestic and foreign donations for the country's COVID-19 response operation. We also develop a publicly available online platform showing all donations received by OCD. On facility management, OCD also takes charge in the establishment and maintenance of COVID-19 swabbing and quarantine facilities by providing medical supplies, diagnostic equipment, and ancillary services for patients and healthcare workers. This slide is the summation of the country's effort in the COVID-19 logistics response. We have worked tirelessly together with our partners from the government and private sectors to provide support to our countrymen during the pandemic. From the transportation of PPEs, vaccines, test kits, to the installation of equipment to various facilities. We were able to deliver 9,813,468 PPE sets to 2,327 beneficiaries with the help of our partners in the uniform service and our friends from the private sector. We have received 12,260 donations from domestic and international donors and have distributed it to medical facilities nationwide. We have received more than $770,000 in financial donation that we use to procure medical supplies, medical equipment for our hospitals and quarantine facilities. AHA Center supported the Philippines by providing 5,000 hygiene kits and the availability of their mobile storage unit for the use of the TGRML operations. They have also made available the Disaster Emergency Logistics System for ASEAN, or DELSA, satellite warehouse, a storage facility, and staging area for dispatch operations. Though government resources are limited, help did not run short coming from the private sector and international partners. Currently, we are enhancing our logistics networks established in key locations nationwide for warehousing and storage capabilities. We are building these facilities to strengthen our response capacity and extend our reach in providing assistance. We also have warehouse and logistics hub in Cebu and Butuan. These facilities will serve as staging areas and operations facility for response activity conducted in our regional offices in Southern Philippines. With a growing network of warehouses, we will need additional support from the private sector to capacitate these facilities. We will need the help of our partners to ensure that these facilities, the expertise of our personnel, and the overall operations of the NDRRMC will remain to improve and strengthen to better face any disasters. In closing, allow me to share key learnings in emergency logistics. First, logistics management requires a multi-sectoral, whole of society approach and the active participation of the private sector. Second, strategic pre-positioning contributes to the success of disaster response operations. And lastly, arrangement should be done during peacetime to better equip ourselves in responding to disasters. Thank you very much and good afternoon. That ends my presentation.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Director Rafi, for the presentation. Very comprehensive look at the National Disaster Response Plan, especially your response cluster approach and your logistics plan. We're happy that a lot of our private sector participants in on this call are actually strong partners of your OCD program. When I refer to AirAsia, Zuellig, UPS, and of course PDRF and its other members. Also, I want to acknowledge, the point you made about the importance of that warehousing system and the fact that AHA has a helped set up warehouse and satellite warehouse systems in the Philippines. So important for us to be able to store and then eventually pre-position goods. So thank you, Director Rafi, for that, and we'll get back to you a little later on with questions. At this stage, let me invite our second speaker, who's going to be speaking about supply chain during a pandemic situation. I'd like to welcome Chris Buono, the Managing Director of UPS Philippines in Indonesia. Chris is responsible for the overall express operations in both markets, Philippines and Indonesia. And he was a great partner of PDRF in helping us bring in 40 metric tons of medical grade fabric for manufacture of PPEs in the Philippines. And he did it on extremely short notice after the Department of Trade and Industry and the Board of Investments gave us a call at PDRF one weekend. We relayed the message to Chris and immediately he was on it, and we were able to bring in the goods the following week. So thank you, Chris, for that. Let's all please welcome Chris Buono, talk about supply chain during the pandemic.
Thank you, Bill. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Chris.
All right, perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to PDRF for allowing me the opportunity to speak to all of you today. I'm super honored to be here with all of my esteemed colleagues and peers in talking about the supply chain, global supply chain, and how it operated during the pandemic. So what I'm going to focus on a little bit is really what happened with the supply chain during the pandemic, because if you're a shipper, there's probably quite a number of challenges and impacts in a few different ways, all right? And I'm going to cover a couple of those over the course of the next couple of minutes. For those shippers, especially here out of Asia and to other parts of the world, we saw initially during the initial parts of the pandemic through really 2020, a massive decrease in the amount of aircraft capacity that was available globally, with obviously many airlines not flying due to restrictions. A lot of commercial capacity that is normally used to transport goods along with those passengers was just not available. And that really meant that providers like UPS were tasked with making full use of its aircraft to service customers from really around the world. What we saw in a lot, this resulted in really a lot of planning from UPS's side and others to ensure that we could continue to provide the valued service in the face of the massive amount of demand for uplift that was really required. What we also saw was some impact to time in transit, with additional delays in some cases due to enhanced government restrictions and guidelines with regards to a specific country's response to the pandemic. And UPS, however, reacted in ways that we just not have seen in the 113 years of history. And UPS was all over the world really heeded to the call to continue delivering for our customers. And while not perfect, in a lot of cases, we had a lot of challenges along the way, but I'm super proud of the work that our teams did around the world to continue to support both our small and large customers, finding solutions to some of the most urgent matters out there. Second, we saw, and in talking to a lot of customers, we saw really an increased focus on cost savings from a reduced cash flow perspective. The immediate impact of many, if not most, businesses being forced to suspend operations due to this reduced cash flow. And while many businesses continue to operate in some capacity after lockdowns had been lifted, this did not necessarily mean business was really back to usual. Operations and cash flows would still be impacted over the next few months as some economies were facing fresh infections and restrictions. Third, many businesses, and we saw this in the Philippines, shifted to digital and e-commerce due to the requirements and guidelines around social distancing. The pandemic has absolutely exponentially accelerated the digital transformation of so many companies around the world. E-commerce has become an absolute necessity for many businesses to operate, as most populations were just staying at home. This is going to have a profound implication on business models moving forward. It's also an opportunity to have some businesses look into new markets beyond, say, the Philippines and Asia, to either source or to sell, because everybody is just more digitally connected. Fourth, everyone is experiencing inventory delays and some shortages during the past year. Specific challenges include the limited cargo capacity, like we talked about, limited visibility on the status of shipments, and companies were seeking alternate modes for their supply chain, land, air, sea, or any combination of those to move their goods. And lastly, labor and fulfillment challenges. There were a lot of different challenges on the ground. Shortages, a lot of folks we had in terms of quarantines were not able to get out of their homes, weren't able to get to work. Employees might be unable to cross checkpoints between cities. And while we did have many staff working from home, the interconnectivity of individuals from an office perspective did pose its own set of challenges. And this absolutely impacted all levels of operations, no matter what business you were in. Fulfillment challenges come from impacted suppliers, goods not moving, and shortages of raw materials and products. So just a couple of the high-level challenges that at least we saw from a shipper's perspective based on quite a number of customer responses, in 2020. UPSers really responded to the pandemic in so many ways, and just I'll highlight a couple ways that we did right in the Philippines in 2020. It's interesting that we look at the Taal volcanic eruption back in January 2020 because it seems like an absolute lifetime ago. And I remember at the time, being on the ground with my folks and just the massive amount of upheaval that it caused, not knowing that a pandemic was right around the corner. But in January, we were providing supply chain services to support the response of hygiene kits from PDRF to evacuation centers in Batangas during that eruption in 2020. We did also provide some in-kind logistics services to other members of PDRF's network during this very critical time. Next slide. As Bill mentioned a little bit earlier, we provided logistics services to DTI and DOH to bring in medical grade fabric. I remember working with the USEC and many people. It was actually over Holy Week, where we literally worked almost 12 to 15 hours a day trying to get uplift of the medical grade fabric just to get here. And I still have one of the PPEs, from the ceremony with DTI and DOH. So I'll treasure that actually I haven't needed to wear it yet, so that's great. But yeah, it's just something that when you get down to it, you're able to really accomplish anything. And last slide. So we did provide logistics support for deliveries of relief items from DELSA to affected communities in Bicol due to Typhoon Raleigh. And we're going to continue to deliver what matters for our customers through our best-in-class network and support the communities that we live and serve. So thank you for your time today, and I'll hand it over back to Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris. You're right. Now that you mentioned it, I remember it was Holy Week, and we all had a scramble. But thanks for that. So yeah, I can really appreciate the challenges that you mentioned. We had a drop in capacity. We've had lockdown and then opening and then lockdown and opening. But at every stage, the economy never really opened up to its pre-pandemic scale. And then while there was a lot of digital transformation, at the end of the day, you still need to move physical goods, whether for the economy or for humanitarian reasons. And faced with labor shortages, quarantines, checkpoints, you really are faced with challenges of still trying to move physical goods out. So that's a great job that you guys do in responding to the situation. Let me move on to our next speaker, who also faces a great challenge and developments, but this time in the area of passenger travel during a pandemic and the kind of innovations that the passenger air travel industry has to undergo and put into motion. So our next speaker is Mr. Ricky Isla, who's CEO of AirAsia Philippines. He's got more than 40 years experience in domestic and global operations, including retail and sales, distribution, business development, marketing and innovation, and general management across diverse industries such as telecommunications, property, consumer and retail companies. PDRF is, of course, proud to have AirAsia as one of its logistics partners. They ferry both people and supplies to disaster-stricken areas. So let me please welcome Mr. Ricky Isla for AirAsia. Ricky, the floor is yours.
Hi guys, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. This is Ricky Isla from Philippines AirAsia. I've been in the airline industry for about 2 years, and before that, I just also want to say hi, Bill, to my good friend Butch, because I came from PLDT for 18 years, and after which I joined AirAsia mid-2020, right? No, 2019, I'm sorry. And I never expected that the biggest challenge in my whole career is going to be this COVID pandemic. Next, please. How did it impact the airline industry? COVID-19 was, next page, please. Next page. Okay. This is how it impacted as far as tourism is concerned. Philippines tourism actually contributes a huge 12.7% of Philippines GDP in 2019, of which this 12.7, okay, get 10.8%, and this is actually the domestic tourism, and the balance is international. Number 2 point, now let's look at how it impacted impacted on the business. As far as top line is concerned, in terms of value, we only generated 81 billion from last year, okay, that's 2020, which is a significant decline of about 80 to 83%, coming from a big successful 2019 of about 482 billion pesos. In terms of international traffic, okay, this is another 84% decline. We only registered 1.3 arrivals versus 2019 of about 8.2. Net, we actually cumulatively, okay, generated a huge loss of 65 billion pesos. And therefore, we have to do some operating expense savings or cost cutting, which actually impacted more or less about 5,000 of our airline workers. Very tough job. But as we said, we have to be agile, we have to be brave and resilient, and more importantly, we have to be creative. I would say, next page please, the airline industry was the first to actually push safety first as the core of business strategy, and this is mainly on the contactless transaction. Okay, if you're going to actually, before going to the airport, there's always what you call a pre-flight advisory in all social media. Okay, because actually right now there's a lot of differences in terms of how local government units actually implement their safety protocols. And we have to make sure that a week before their flight, we want to make sure that all our passengers are properly advised, and we really invest a lot on social media. Number two, you cannot actually take your plane without actually registering in the Trace app. This is for automatic contact tracing, and hats off to the government for implementing this in coordination with the Department of Transport and Department of Tourism. And finally, on our part, we have to install more check-in kiosks. These are all contactless, such that you will be able to get your ticket, get your baggage ticket at the same time, just in one machine, which is our contactless kiosk. Next page, please. But even before that, as early as March, we already did our own campaign. The first one is, of course, giving all our employees the right PPEs, and at the same time, in-flight announcements on personal hygiene and other health protocols. The usual, like for example, 1 to 2 meters away as you enter the airplane craft, about 2 to 3 times of about thermal checks. And at the same time, we have to be very strict in terms of implementing. You're not supposed to ride the aircraft without your proper PPE gears as a passenger. And at the same time, we have to ensure that our HEPA, or high efficiency particulate air, for all our 24 Airbus aircrafts are actually working, because this is actually the most important to us, that gives you what you call reassurance that 99.9% of bacteria and viruses, including COVID, are disinfected every 2 to 3 minutes. And of course, finally, on the exit, we still ensure that there's social distancing. Those are the things, next page please, that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. However, we have to step beyond what we're currently doing. And our communications team came out with this campaign called Always Ready, which is at the same time we have to make sure that we're agile. And the first column actually tells us that we just launched recently that All Stars at Your Service. All of them, we selected our employees, and this is the first online aviation show in the Philippines, in the social media, updating our guests in a very positive way so that it reinforces positive air travel on the new normal trends and guidelines for traveling that focuses on safety. And at the same time, we want to rebuild confidence with regards to air travel and tourism. Next, we have to distribute what you call our Always Ready safety kits, okay? Alcohol, face masks, and the works. And finally, in spite of that, we still went ahead with our corporate social responsibility by partnering with the Liter of Light, an organization that provides what we call solar-powered lights. And we went to those that cannot be tapped or cannot be reached by power. Therefore, we came out with this rechargeable solar-powered lights, especially to the fishing village as far as Mindanao and also as far as northern Luzon. And next one, please. Well, last November, of course, there's what we call the Typhoon Rolly and Ulysses. We have to step back and made sure that in our partnership with the PDRF, with Veron, Gabaldon, and of course, Butch Mailey, we were able to mount flights in Bicol region and in Cagayan region. And we actually were able to gather a lot of donations from private companies. And we mounted mercy flights in these typhoon-stricken provinces. Next page, please. Now, moving forward, okay, we know that we also have to do a lot of repatriation flights, which we've been doing since April of 2020. As a matter of fact, we have already sent home about 40 to 50,000 OFs and long LSIs back to their provinces. At the same time, we are also going to push harder what we call the more cost-efficient, which is highly accurate at about 98%, and faster results, which is called the saliva RT-PCR. And finally, we are launching soon, hopefully, the tourism bubble. Specifically, our top priorities will be Bohol, Boracay, Puerto Princesa, and others like, for example, Siargao. Just this morning, we were with Governor Yap of Bohol. And next page, please. We are able to mount a lot of travel bubbles, starting with what we call domestic flights, because we know that we have to build economy. Next page, please. Click one. Okay, for the domestic travels, there's a huge potential, and there's about 11 million passengers that will be coming from Manila, and 74% total 2019 outbound domestic passengers. That will happen because if we think that there's going to be a bubble, let's say in Bohol or in Boracay, and there's going to be, let's say, a bubble in Manila, we can immediately mount tourism as one of our top priorities. Not only domestic, but next page will tell us that there's also going to be sustained commercial efforts for the international bubble, especially coming from Korea, mainland China, Taiwan, where the COVID cases are low, and we're looking at around 4.4 million passengers for international, looking at travel bubble handling guidelines. Green lane, for example, if you are already vaccinated, you're part of the green lane, and many more. For example, the last one we're looking at is what you call the vaccine pass, or what we call the travel pass or the digital health passport. Next one, please. And finally, part of Always Ready, we are ready by, as early as now, we are ready to transport vaccines. And at the same time, we know that we also want to adopt what we call the digital travel pass. Hopefully, this is going to provide green lane for those who are vaccinated. And moving next chart, please. Okay, and this is now what we call the new business model of AirAsia. We're not just an airline, we are now a lifestyle, a travel e-commerce platform. So you can go to airasia.com, book your flight, hotels, book your activities, bags, meals, and seats. There's also what we call, you can do your shopping. And everything that has to be contactless, has to be online, actually proves that we are really into the digital space. So marami pong salamat, and thank you very much to our friends from PDRF. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ricky. First of all, thanks for the services that you give on the humanitarian front. The mercy flights that you did for PDRF, where you went out of your way beyond what your normal route and destinations are, taking people and goods to deliver for Ulysses and Raleigh. Of course, thanks as well for the repatriation flights for overseas Filipinos and locally stranded Filipinos to look at new test technology, and of course your good luck with your work on the tourism bubbles and the return to more travel. I think the future in your industry, you're looking at it already, and you're already embarked on it. One of contactless transaction, and one, of course, of digital transport passes, which I think will become more critical in the future. So thanks for that, Ricky, and we'll return to you. We'll return to you during the Q&A. And our final speaker for this segment will be discussing developments in emergency medical logistics. I'm referring here to Janette Jakosalem, the Chief Business Officer of Zuellig Pharma and Metro Drug. I happen to work very closely with Janette in the private sector's vaccine consortium, which closely coordinates with the government in the National Vaccine Deployment Program. We've also had the chance and the pleasure to work together in our joint project with Zuellig, known as Project Kaagapay, which moved goods like PPEs, ventilators, and test kits to different healthcare facilities around the country. So thank you to Janette, Ray Azurin, and the Zuellig team for that. Let's all please welcome Janette Jakosalem from Zuellig Pharma. Janette, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon to all the prestigious panelists and the attendees. Congratulations to the AHA Center and the hosts, PDRF and UPS, for this successful logistics summit. It's an honor for Zuellig Pharma to be able to participate and contribute to the goals of the AHA Center to provide solutions to address gaps in logistics capabilities. Next, please. Please allow me a few seconds to introduce my company, Zuellig Pharma. Our owners set up their first company in the Philippines in 1922. Our core business is in the distribution of pharmaceutical products, medicines, and vaccines. Since our inception almost 100 years ago, we have expanded to 13 other countries in Asia. Today, we employ over 13,000 people some of whom man our 76 warehouses across the region. We are a keen supporter to sustainability, and one of our pillars is diversity and inclusion. As such, we are always proud to say that even as our business is in logistics, we do employ 44% women in our organization. Today, we also engage with over 9.8 million users of our digital platforms in countries like the Philippines, Malaysia, and Thailand. Our mission is to make quality health care available to the communities that we operate in. Next, please. As Bill mentioned, and in keeping with our mission, we joined the Philippine Disaster Resiliency Foundation to form Project Kaagapay during the onset of COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020. Project Kaagapay's aim was to protect the healthcare heroes of the Philippines by providing the much-needed personal protective equipment and ventilators that was in so much shortage then. The regular interaction of our field force with hospitals, doctors, and other stakeholders in the medical field brought forth all these requirements and helped us to address and identify which specific hospitals were priority in need and severity of cases. Zuellig Pharma's strength in supply chain enabled relationships that provided contacts and source of PPEs and equipment that were not available locally. The same relationships also allowed us to reach out to business partners that enabled deliveries to areas that during the pandemic were hard to reach. Next, please. The pandemic brought to bear Zuellig Pharma's breadth in experience and expertise. On the onset of the quarantine and lockdown, Zuellig Pharma and its affiliate Metro Drug were the only distributors that were able to continue to deliver medicines and vaccines to hospitals and drugstores nationwide. The pandemic tested our business continuity plans, our agility to address impediments, and our digital tools and platforms that enabled us to continue to service our clients and customers. Because of movement limitation, the single stocking concept and just-in-time delivery models were challenged. In Zuellig Pharma and MDI, we were very quick to shift our clients on a central stocking to a regional setup.
Seem to have lost Janet momentarily. Let's wait till she gets back on. Okay. While we're waiting for Janet to get back on, let me just shift and use this time to ask a few questions from the other speakers. Let me start with going back to Director Rafi. Director, I think you've done a great job with the logistics, moving products around the Philippines, around the country. I wanted to take a more international, sort of a regional picture on how your logistics cluster, the governments, can make use of assistance from the region or globally. For instance, do you foresee the use of some sort of humanitarian express lane for products coming through our airports so that we can clear them quickly and get them onto disaster sites? Is that something that you plan to do?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. Actually, that is one aspect that we really need to come up with. We need our OSS, our one-stop shop, really is still inadequate. No, we still encounter some delays. No, and having a goods coming from international source or donations or support from international or regional entities that needs to come in fast. No, will have to be processed in a way that our usual processing in our customs bureau, our airports should be lessened. So we tried that before. During this pandemic, we established a one-stop shop, but we still need to improve, no? because there are items, there are still goods that are coming in that when subjected to our procedures still encounter some delays. So we really need to come up with this kind of system wherein help from the outside would really be fast, no? In processing. Our one-stop shop should really be improved. So because we still encounter some delays, especially from items coming from abroad.
Yeah, yes, Director. Actually, we do, and I think that even though we have Bayanihan Act and you can have some express lane services there, what's also important is even without Bayanihan Act that we have still express lane, and I think that maybe we should work together with UPS because they clear goods very quickly for humanitarian goods extremely quickly for PDRF, and we could learn from them. Let me move to Chris. So, Chris, you mentioned, we had a situation where you're faced with a lot of handicaps, quarantines, checkpoints, a shortage of employees, and yet you're able to move the physical goods. How do you see UPS and the logistics cluster help in the recovery of the supply chain, not only for disaster situations, but also for the economy in general? Because I think we're going to need that as well for the economy to recover.
Yeah. So, man, I could spend another 4 hours talking about that question. Actually, I'll try to keep it short. Part of what we do on a regular basis is just working with our customers on the different solutions that we have available to help them reach their goals. And just to talk about one specific one would be what we call supply chain mapping, where we sit down and we kind of whiteboard out what their network and their business looks like now, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, plus a long-term model 5 years down the road. So that is kind of one area where we just kind of look to address their needs, and see whether or not are there additional opportunities for them. For example, okay, maybe they're just shipping to Europe right now, and they want to look at opportunities to ship, say, to more intra-Asia countries or even to the U.S. So it's really sort of listening to our customers and understanding their needs in the face of all of the support that we're doing on a regular basis for either PPE movement or vaccine distribution. And Bill, you're quite aware that, one of the things that we first talked about, in one of the initial planning calls was how do these things sort of work side by side? Because the reality is that the vaccine distribution is not a one-time boom effort, right? We got to be able to coexist. And so many companies want to be a part of the vaccine distribution, which is wonderful, and it's great to support those communities. But at the same time, the economy needs an injection, right? We need to push folks to start manufacturing again, bring in more raw materials, get finished goods out. And that's where we where we really need to work together to kind of see where that balance is going to be, because it's obvious that the vaccines are going to definitely help stimulate the economy, but we want to continue to ensure that folks that have been operating during the entire pandemic can continue to get their goods out as necessary.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You're right. It's a tough balancing act. You have to handle both sensitive delivery like vaccines, but at the same time, make sure that we keep capacity open for the rest of the economy to bounce back. No, let's move back to Janet. Janet got cut off a little bit, lost her connection on her presentation. Janet, let's go back to you and continue with your presentation, please.
Yes, I think Miss Janet's just having a bit of an issue, like switching on her camera, I guess.
Yeah, or her audio. Janet, your audio is on mute. Okay, while Janet is working on that, let me move to Ricky and get back to passenger travel. So Ricky, you mentioned a few bubbles. You mentioned Bohol, you mentioned Boracay. What's your forecast in terms of how you see things returning a little closer to normal, And what I'd like to talk a little bit about the digital travel pass you mentioned. Are you in discussion with other airlines in the country and internationally on a common platform for a quote unquote vaccine passport or digital travel pass? Because I guess all you airlines are going to need this, and it's going to have to connect with all the airports you fly through. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. First one, let's talk about the bubble. And I think there's really a good potential to introduce bubble as soon as we're able to reach the right level of, I would say not really right, but the lowest level of COVID in strategic areas. Like for example, Boracay and Bohol. If you're going to look at Boracay and Bohol, their cases are low, but there has to be a strong effort for them to implement, especially to their frontliners related to tourism, hotel, restaurants, with regards to getting the vaccine as soon as possible. That's the most important on their side. On the side of the passengers, especially Manila outbound going to these destinations, it is also important to check not only where they're coming from in terms of COVID cases, but I think ever since we've been doing RT-PCR as a prerequisite going to these locations. But more importantly, I think is that if ever they are going to these destinations, they already have an app that they are using, like for example, Boracay app and the Bohol app, aside from the Trace app, wherein everybody is able to put in their flight destinations, their details, and many others. Just to confirm also that they are into right RT-PCR. Now, if that is now the right mix, then therefore we can then start creating bubbles. The domestic is going to be the top priority as far as the bubble is concerned, the travel bubble is concerned, and hopefully when we think that we have reached enough inoculated Metro Manila and at the same Metro Manila people, and at the same time we're very confident that there's already what you call a flattening trend with regards to new cases and active cases are on the way down, then I think that's the best time for us to create a bubble. And timing-wise, I think we're looking at hopefully by third quarter, towards the latter part of third quarter.
Okay.
Okay.
That's quite soon, huh? Okay.
Yes. Towards the latter part of third quarter, because like there's around August, more or less about August, September. Now, if you're also going to look at the international market, for example, Korea only, mainland China has about 300 cases, Taiwan is about 2,700 cases active, and Korea has about 8,400 cases. They're really low, significantly. They're well contained, and at the same time, there's a huge potential of about 4.4 million international passengers. But again, what we're looking at is if there is a possibility of creating that international travel bubble from these three destinations, which ever since like 2019 has already produced a huge 4.4 million passengers as regular tourists. So it is a good mix of, again, I think we have to make sure that there's low cases of active COVID, and at the same time, the right level of vaccination or inoculated population. Now, let's go back to what we call the travel pass, which is actually right now being studied by IATA. Okay, and we know that at present we are carefully studying the IATA exercise wherein what is important again is what you call the green pass, wherein vaccine again plays a very important role. That app has been done in some countries. There is already an app, as a matter of fact, in what we call Boracay app and the Bohol app, which is still an indication of your health status and your, now they have to add the vaccine status, aside from the fact that they also have to look at this as a possible tracing and therefore can give you a green pass. So the way I look at it, hopefully by fourth quarter, okay, we are able to already introduce that kind of exercise, the green pass, to all our domestic and international tourists. But again, international plays a little bit as a second priority, we just have to address first all this domestic tourism, which actually contributes a huge 70 to 80% of all the tourism revenues in the Philippines, right? In 2019.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ricky. So, yeah, the focus domestic. I think you're right. People are itching to get out and travel to places. So that's a good idea. Let me turn back again to Janette Jakosalem. Janet, let's continue with your presentation.
Yeah, hi Bill. Sorry about that. So I left off on this chart and I think, talking about Easy Consult, which is our mobile and web-based platform that enables booking and scheduling of doctor consults, laboratory tests, COVID-19 vaccinations, and other flu vaccinations. This app actually also enables online purchase of prescription medicines. We also have EasySafe, which is a platform linked to COVID testing, and we partnered with SafePass, the digital contact tracing app, for faster contact tracing and quick quarantine action in the event of a business site situation. Leveraging on our strength in logistics and distribution, we developed Easy Supply, which is our internally branded logistics service for COVID-19 vaccines. The aim is to be able to provide end-to-end logistics service for COVID vaccines and backed with digital solutions that will enable supply planning and an efficient vaccine administration. I would like to focus now my next few slides on Easy Supply. Next, please. So we all know the supply chain process, and it starts with procurement. But for COVID-19 supply chain, it ends with the vaccine being finally administered to the citizen. But what is important to note is the integration of processes within this chain, the manning of experts, and the automation and digitalization to make the whole process efficient. In view of the scale of the COVID-19 mass vaccination program and the complexity of dealing with multiple vaccines, it is most important that all these key areas are in sync. Zuellig Pharma's role in the Philippine mass vaccination program is not only in providing for quality logistics and distribution of the vaccines, but also in helping the local government units and private sector to set and define clear processes and guidelines. These processes are needed so that inoculation is conducted safely, orderly, and efficiently. Next, please. Moving to the warehousing requirements of the vaccines, while an important consideration is capacity and temperature requirements, there are considerations that are equally important. A pharma-grade warehouse requires redundancies, automated temperature monitoring devices, and a track and trace capability that manages vaccines at batch and lot number and inventory via first expiry, first out. While Zuellig Pharma focused most of last year to build capacity in our warehouses, we also strengthened our processes to ensure that our warehouses and personnel are shovel-ready when the vaccines arrive. Next, please. On delivery, again, ensuring 100% compliance to the temperature requirements of the vaccines is primordial, even when these are in transit to the vaccination sites. But expertise in this part of the supply chain allows for proper assessment on what method of delivery to apply that is most practical, efficient, and optimal. Next, please. The pandemic has certainly highlighted and accelerated the importance of digital solutions, especially in the healthcare space and in COVID-19 vaccination. A vaccination program of scale and complexity needs to be supported with a solid digitized platform. So for example, to avoid crowding at the vaccination centers, a digital platform can help with the following. First, pre-registration, effective prioritization, and scheduling so that citizens are directed to be at the site only at a specific date and hour. Second, digital platforms to be filled up or forms to be filled up prior to the vaccination day so that the flow of at the site is faster and smoother. And finally, notifications and electronic reminders to improve adherence to the vaccine protocol. Zuellig Pharma's EasyVax was built to support the COVID-19 vaccination. it is also supported by our supply chain systems, EasyRx, on an online replenishment request for vaccination by the sites. Easy Tracker is also our blockchain technology that checks the authenticity of the vaccine and issues a vaccine certificate that is verifiable and authenticated. Next, please. We have a process flow that caters to the government's mass vaccination program, where inoculation is done by the local government units and are free for citizens of the LGU. Next, please. When the vaccines for the private sector arrive in June, we will be ready to roll out the same platform, but tweak slightly to cater to the private sector flow, where the vaccines are paid for by the companies. Next, please. A key component of the supply chain management of the vaccine is ensuring that those that handle it have gained verifiable experience and that personnel have undergone the necessary training and accreditation. Next, please. Finally, this is how the Zuellig Pharma in the Philippines aims to support the ambitious objective of our government to be able to vaccinate as many Filipinos as possible before the end of the year. We support the National Task Force in its aim for every Filipino to have a better Christmas in 2020. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, Janette, for your presentation. So, I think you've got a big job at Zuellig. You're moving vaccines and supplies across so many islands. And can you tell us a little bit about the specific challenge you might face and how you plan to solve them, delivering the last mile all the way to the vaccine site? Considering there are thousands of sites across thousands of islands.
Yeah, the main problem around the vaccines or challenge around the vaccine, Bill, is really the sensitivity to temperature control. So the key challenge would be how fast we can get the vaccine to the vaccination center so that we're able to keep the temperature requirement of the vaccine. We have road challenges, for example. Flight schedules are very limited. Today, we are managing lesser commercial flights versus what we had in 2019. This is another challenge that we need to work with. Third is the availability of storage at the vaccination sites.
Mhm.
Working with the private sector, I think they will have capability and capacity to store the vaccines at the site. But with the LGU, this is another challenge that we are facing, the capability to store the vaccines on site.
Yeah, I think I can see that's going to be such a tough job to handle, spreading across so many small vaccine sites in some of them probably in quite isolated area. So yeah, good luck with that, and we're going to get back to that a little later on. At this stage, I want to proceed to the next part of our program before we kind of return to the Q&A portion. And this is a program that tackles the initiatives, covers the initiatives of both UPS and PDRF for micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, and their supply chains. And MSMEs, of course, form the backbone of our economy, and ensure that they can adapt to the challenges of the pandemic is key to our future. They account for a large part of the economy and a large number of our workers. So they need to not only survive in a time of pandemic, but they need to thrive in a pandemic and post-pandemic era. So let me call on Mr. Hans-Peter Teufers, International Program Director at UPS Foundation and a longtime PDRF partner, and Mr. Butch Bailey, President of PDRF, to lead us in this dialogue. Let me turn over to you, Butch and Hans-Peter.
Well,
Sorry.
Bill, thanks a lot. I mean, we are still at HELiX, so that's what I just want to clarify. So this is not Comic-Con, so it's not the wrong session you have chosen. We are still on. It's just a good example on how awareness building could be done and what tools can be used. For instance, to make sure that people are, getting the right attention to resilience, which is a little bit like selling insurances, right? Which is always a tricky thing. But we found a way with Dimartinak. I would like to hand over to Butch to explain a little bit why we did it and what we did there.
Well, Hans, there's a saying, in vino veritas, in wine truth, but this in vino creativity, because Hans and I were having a beer in Vietnam after trying to start a connecting business initiative network there. And we came up with the idea of communicating business resilience in this, which I think is a creative way, through a comic book and with a superhero. And this is the result of it. I urge everyone to take a look at it. It's a story of hope and resilience and coming back and recovering from hardship. So I'm really proud to have done this with you, Hans. And here.
Thanks a lot.
I know you're doing other things also. I know UPS is doing other things also.
Yeah, we do, for sure. Even though it is a box, and the box brings me to the topic what we want to talk about, namely resilience in a box. So that's something that has been identified as very relevant in the field of resilience a few years ago, when we were trying to find out how hands-on training sessions, for instance, can be scaled. And what we did there is we created a type of awareness building toolkit. And just to explain that, there are many regulations in a lot of countries related to what you have to do as a company leader in resilience. So the problem is a lot of people are not doing it. So it's not common, it's not part of the overall, let's say, behavior scheme, especially when you're looking into small and medium-sized businesses or even micro businesses. And so this tool mainly is focusing on awareness on resilience with a business preparedness quiz, which should be light, with top 20 tips. And that is something that is coming from the idea of the 2080 or 80-20 principle, where we are saying, if you only follow 4 or 5 of those advices of the top 20 tips already, then you are probably already 80% resilient. So you can concentrate on the small remaining that is left over, and then even invest more work into that. And then we have created a 101 workbook, and this 101 workbook is offering already a main portion of a complete disaster resilience business plan. So it offers you very good insight into this one. And then the next stage, especially for maybe a little bit of a bigger, small and medium-sized company, is then to go and do a full-fledged work on business continuity with a plan, and then maybe as using as well a consultant for that. But basically, it's about awareness building, and basically it is something that leads organizations into that, which we have produced about 6 years ago, maybe. Yeah, 6 years ago. In the meantime, translated into different languages. So it's even in Arabic languages, for instance, available. And we put it on the homepage of one of our partners, the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation. It's for free, and it is generic. And so this generic version, we handed over to a number of different partners, for instance, PDRF.
That's right. And I want to thank you for that. What we did is we took your resilience in a box and we Philippinized it. And we tried to do it in a creative way by coming up with a mobile app. It will be available for everyone to download this month. This is what it looks like, but it helps small business owners understand what's important to create a business continuity plan, what the hazards are, what the resources are for their different firms. And we're really proud of it. And I want to thank UPS for this partnership here. Now, Hans, I know you've got another movement in Turkey that you're working on as well for MSMEs.
Correct. Thanks, Butch. This is the idea here, and Saglam Kobi, that stands for, Kobi is small and medium-sized business in Turkish, and Saglam is healthy or resilient or stable. So it's more or less what we would call resilient enterprise. And it is a mix where we started working on disaster resilience many years ago after an earthquake. And we used Turkey a little bit as a playing field for ideas, so that there was a huge type of cross-fertilizing between resilience in the box generic model and as well some things that we tested in Turkey with Saglam Kobi. And not everything went well, to be very honest with you. I mean, we had we had disappointments, for instance, when we started thinking about how to scale programs. And it is easy. I mean, if you are thinking about you are successful because you have trained 2,000 or 3,000 small and medium-sized businesses, and then you look into the country and you know that there are 2 million businesses around or even more, then so what is success in that regard? Is it that you have maybe 10% or 15 or 20? And so we needed to go digital. That was very clear at that stage. And so what we did with the help of some partners as well. So there are some, you see some brands in here that are working in that sphere of Saglam Kobi as well. So we started working on social resilience and economic resilience in digital resilience, especially in the past 1.5 years when COVID came over us, so to speak. And especially digital resilience played a major role, where Google and YBI we're working on a lot in the past months with programs, helping as well companies, to export, helping companies as well to, prepare for a time after COVID and extend their business rationale from their probably local store that they were doing. And so if this is a very good example what you can do if you are really engaging and trying to work with partners. And that was the rationale behind Saglam Kobi as well. Once we figured out we cannot do this in the way as we have done it, so we needed to go through a type of a transformation, and the transformation went together with partners very well in the past 2 years. And if you want to look into that, if you want to know more, there's a presentation at the Innovation Expo of HELiX as well, where you can look into that. And you probably, if you have any questions, please let me know. So having said that, I would love to get back to the approach in the Philippines with the micro enterprises and with the gold standard that we have with PDRF.
Thanks, Hans. Well, PDRF took that idea of partnership, and we created a resilience core group, and it's really a public-private sector partnership. It includes the Office of Civil Defense, Department of Trade and Industry, Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, PhilExport, Asia Pacific Alliance for Disaster Management, Employees Confederation in the Philippines, and of course PDRF. And over the last few years, we've trained over 9,000 small business owners around the country, plus another 6,000 have joined conferences and forums that we've organized. And we came up with this very comprehensive guidebook, the MSE guidebook, which teaches small business owners. It's a free resource, like everything else that we've done so far, that helps businesses prepare for any kind of disasters, explains why preparedness is important. It is a checklist on what to do during an emergency. It includes any resources that you'll need, list of emergency contacts, and it also includes the part about how to recover from disasters and where you can access loans for small businesses. So it's a great guidebook that every small business should have. And when you combine this MSME guidebook together with the comic book and with the Katatagan in a box, I forgot to mention the exact name, Resilience in a Box, we have both a low-tech solution with a comic book and a high-tech one with the mobile app of the Katatagan in a Box. And then we also have this MSME guidebook that we've developed. So it's comprehensive in terms of all these solutions. And these are free solutions for MSMEs and small business owners. Hans, what do you think is next in this area?
Well, what I think we need to extend the reach a little bit more. As I said earlier, scaling is of the essence on one hand, but on the other side, it is the most complicated thing. We saw that many different programs around the globe, and I mean, there's a German saying, we are all cooking with the same water, right? And I think there's an expression in each and every language from that. So therefore, why reinventing the wheel? I mean, there's enough stuff available on one hand, but the mechanisms, how to scale it, that's a different animal. And so we have a number of organizations around the globe. So like RISE, for instance, led by UNDRR, as well as CBI, Connecting Business Initiatives, where companies are working together and trying to make sure that their common efforts are leading to better results than working only on your own. And I mean, you are more aware than I am, Butch, what it means for a country organization in the Philippines to be part of both networks and trying to make sure that you got everything coordinated, which you have done very well. As I said, gold standard for all of us for the time being, that is PDRF for sure. Now, the one thing I would like to say here towards the end, because I know there are questions, and there's one question as well related to the comic book, the channels that we have used in the Philippines to disseminate that. The one thing I would like to say is there is a big chance with COVID. So there is a big transformation going on anyway. So everybody has to review the assets, have to review processes, supply chains, value chains, and taking the old slogan that we all know, build back better, trying to redirect that as well to the businesses that we are all in. Use the chance of transformation right now to build back better and build in resilience. $1 spent in resilience is saving $6 to $7 in relief and recovery. That is what we know. Over to you, Butch.
Yeah, Hans, that's a great saying and something we should remember. But yeah, we all understand MSMEs are crucial to the economy. 70% closed during COVID. So we're the private sector has an important play, as the previous panel really portrayed. And the pre-agreements we've had are really critical, especially with UPS. I want to thank UPS for being a great partner. And I'd like to ask everyone here to just join us in helping prepare small businesses in all our different countries for any crisis, because it's their incomes and their families, their employees that are so important to the economies of our different countries. So please join us in helping continue these businesses and helping them continue during a crisis. And with that, I'd like to end our brief portion here and to Bill.
Thank you, Butch, and thank you, Hans Peter, for the great updates that both PDRF and UPS are doing. Butch, I wanted to say that this is not really a matter of going high tech and low tech, but what it shows is that you and Hans Peter are very in tune with something that is more generational, which is that you're tackling something that is both comic book hero and technology, and that's what appeals to younger people, right? And we live in a region full of young people, and they are our allies in this mission to build resilience. So thanks for that, Butch and Hans Peter. Now, we've been lucky to be given a little bit of an extension by AHA Center, so thank you, Adelina, for that. And there are some questions, and I do want to go to the questions because they're great questions. And I'll move it around. Let me start with a question for Chris Buono. There's a question from Engineer Arnel Cabanatan, and the other panelists can also answer. Well, I'll start with Chris. Does your company already include this pandemic in your business continuity program? And does your program provide free vaccines to all your personnel, especially essential workers and frontliners? And what percentage of your workers have been vaccinated? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I'll touch on the BCP because I think every company is doing something potentially a little bit different on vaccines. But business continuity plans are really interesting things. I consider them ever evolving organisms, because as your business changes, your business continuity plans change as government guidelines and laws and regulations change. Your BCPs need to change. We have had them in place for years and years. From a pandemic perspective, I think we were, and I would, a lot of companies probably would say this. Everybody was sort of reacting in real time, not because we didn't have BCPs in place, but because the rules and the guidelines were changing so frequently that we had to consistently be updated. And within ourselves, because we have a large contingent of workers that are on the ground, either in facilities or out there doing pickups and deliveries, as well as a large contingent working from home, really had to stay connected on a regular basis. And I think no matter the BCPs that you have in place, I think the important thing to position for any company is practice, crisis drills, right? Because you don't know how well those BCPs really will operate unless you test them. And I will say, just in my time in this position in the last 4.5 years, no matter how well your BCPs are documented, you never really know until you actually put them in practice. Going back to, a few areas when we had the earthquake in 2019, Tal in 2020, there's so many different things that happen that you have to have different responses to. I think the last thing I will say is that the leadership at the top of the ladder when it comes to the crisis drill or your business continuity plan really has to take charge. I don't like to use the term dictator, but in terms of positioning where people need to execute when you're implementing those BCPs or when you're trying to follow through, it's so super important that, there are so many different parameters, there's so many different potential issues that may come up, and everything your BCP is not going to cover 100%, that's for sure. So being able to react in real time on the ground, keeping connected through, virtual environments. I mean, we were meeting daily for the first 6 months, of the pandemic, and we still meet, 2 or 3 times a week just to check in.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's been so important. You're right. The situation has been so fluid, and the guidelines have really changed, very rapidly, that we need to be shifting along with it. Did any other of the panelists want to answer that question regarding BCP and the vaccination programs for your own employees?
Okay, now,
Yeah,
can I
Ricky.
answer that in behalf of the airline industry, please? Okay.
Sure.
First of all, we were classified as a top priority as far as the industry is concerned. We're called the A4 group, and this is in coordination with Department of Transportation, as approved by IATF, that all airline company employees and their partners, like for example, ground operators, security, and other service providers, will be provided free vaccine effective June. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, you're correct, Ricky. I was going to say that all of us with employees who are in the essential services and economic frontliners are all
Yes.
classified A4,
A4, yes, Bill.
and are prioritized for free vaccinations by the government. And in some
Right.
cases, companies have also procured their own vaccines, so they can also vaccinate their own employees simultaneously with the government. So in effect, they help the government by relieving the government of the responsibility of vaccinating their own employees. They can take them on, and then that frees up the government resources to vaccinate even more people, and we get to a larger number of people to be vaccinated over time. So I think that's a good idea. Ricky, let me direct the next question at you as well. Somebody's asking about, they understand the point you made on domestic travel, but looking ahead, what do you foresee or what do you advise for the 10 Southeast Asian countries, so the 10 ASEAN countries, and all of us in the 10 are heavily reliant on tourism. What do
Yes.
you say about creating a travel bubble within, or travel corridors, if you want to call it that, within ASEAN when the time is right? Do you foresee that happening?
I agree. It is due to happen, hopefully, well, not in the next 2 months, but if you're going to look at the market of Philippines international tourism, the biggest chunk, which is about 50% of our international inbound, are tourists coming from Korea, China, and Taiwan. These are the three countries which we think, and if we're going to analyze the trend of their active cases, are significantly lower as compared to the other ASEAN countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, right? Well, Thailand is not as high as Indonesia. But if you're going to go back to Korea, China, and Taiwan, I think in terms of opening travel bubbles, let's say to Boracay or going to Panglao, that is, I think, the closest that we can, or the earliest that we can implement. And what is good about this is that Department of Tourism is strictly implementing and coordinating closely with LGUs with regards to strict safety parameters or protocols in all of the hotels and restaurants in these two destinations. Boracay alone contributes about a huge 80% of total traffic in tourism as early as February and March. And we expect Boracay as a top priority, followed by, let's say, Panglao, Siargao, and Palawan. And hopefully, this will actually be all put together, strict in terms of implementation by all the hotels and restaurants in those destinations, strict guidelines with regards to the implementation, let's say, of RT-PCR, which is to be consistently followed as Metro Manila outbound passenger, and also for international inbound to these provinces. I think that's going to be a good mix of a push and pull, and we have to support each other on this travel bubble exercise.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ricky. That's really useful. I think this is going to require a lot of coordination
Yes.
of the industry, the hotel industry, for instance, hospitality industry, ground transport, of course, air transport, and the airports, and it's got to all work together. So thanks
Of
for
course,
that. Thanks for that, Ricky.
And Bill, the most important, I think, is we really have to roll out vaccine as soon as we can.
Yes.
So, for example, if you're looking at Bohol, for example, it was a good discussion earlier. If they really wanted tourism to recover soon, they have to concentrate the deliveries of vaccines in their tourist destinations, in this case, Panglao. So ensure that Panglao Island or Panglao Resort is properly implementing all the vaccines as fast as they can, as compared to the neighboring municipalities or cities in Bohol, if that is tourism as a priority. And if you're going to look at, let's say, Kalibo, then therefore they have to prioritize also Aklan province. They have to prioritize also, of course, Boracay, so that tourism can immediately take effect in terms of recovery.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Ricky. Director Rafi, still on the line. Director Rafi, I apologize.
Yes,
I'm going to have to give you a very tough question here, but someone is asking, is there a way that we can do away with working with LGUs for vaccine distribution? I know, Director Rafi, what do you think?
Technically, we cannot do away because the LGUs are our they're sort of providing the main effort or the frontliners, no? Because the national cannot do it without them. We really have to work closely with the LGUs, but we just need to provide them with the proper supervision, I think. But honestly, we cannot do away with the LGUs.
Yeah, thank you, Director Rafi. I want to echo that as well, that the LGU is the frontliner in the inoculation process, yung vaccination process. The vaccine itself comes from the national government. No? There's some LGUs who bought vaccines, but the bulk of the vaccines come from the national government and are distributed through third-party logistics providers or through OCD logistics to get to all the LGUs. including the supplies, by the way, they flow that way. But when it comes to the physical act of inoculation or vaccination, the LGUs are at the front lines. And helping the LGUs are private hospitals in those LGUs who are also doing the inoculations and the vaccinations in partnership with the LGUs. So LGUs are in it and treat them as our frontliners in that work. They will need to be involved. Director Rafi, I want to ask another question regarding ASEAN-based work. No, I know you already work with AHA Center. You have stockpiling. You have the warehouse. Uh, has there been talk in ASEAN of a regional stockpile? Let's say PPEs. Let's say a shared stockpile of PPEs that everyone has and is shared during an emergency. Can you? Is there such a thing? Is that being discussed in ASEAN?
Uh, yes, at the AHA level, it has been discussed, but there are some limitations as of now for AHA because AHA is specific on providing response for natural disasters. No? Because there's another group in the ASEAN that handles pandemic.
Pandemic, okay.
So, but there's talk already of using the DELSA system of procuring or stockpiling medical supplies for the pandemic.
Yeah, sayang, the infrastructure is there now, so we
Yes.
might as well use it as a regional stockpile for pandemic security.
But lately we use the DELSA system in stockpiling medical supplies from the Philippines. No? We used the DELSA warehouse and they agreed. But from the regional perspective or discussions, if AHA can procure medical supplies, it's still under discussion.
Okay, thank you. Butch, let me go to you for the last question regarding Di Matinag. No? Hans Peter has already answered this question, but since PDRF is the producer of this comic book and this character, it says great communication strategy to spread info. What's the distribution channel, strategy for distribution, and to what communities? Butch, presumably, I guess they're not talking of a new Marvel superhero film. But what if you were the executive producer of this action hero? What's your distribution strategy?
Well, right now it's available actually almost globally, really, because it's available on the internet through our platforms. We have one website called ccap.com.ph. It's targeted at MSME, small business owners. And if you go to that site, you'll be able to download the whole comic book and really make several copies. It's free. We also have a platform called iAdapt that PDRF developed, Bill, and it's if you go to that platform, you'll again be able to download these comics. And we're hoping this might be the first of a series, and there may be further installments of it, and who knows, maybe someday a movie or something based on Timothy. And we were talking about caricatures or cutouts actually being put around different places in Manila that people can pose with the heroine there. But
okay,
that's our idea, and in English at the moment. So really, if you're in Indonesia or other countries, you can potentially access it by going to ccap.com.ph or iAdapt.
Okay, thanks, Butch. Yeah, great idea to have an action comic hero to talk about BCP and resilience. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. First of all, I do want to thank our panelists, Hans-Peter Teufers, Butch Maley. We have Director Rafi, who was with us, Chris Buono, Janette Jakosalem, and Ricky Isla. Thanks for joining us and giving such engaging presentations and answering the questions. Let me just try to recap, I think, with maybe just one or two insights here. And, one thing I think the audience will notice is that because all of us here on this call are not really purely humanitarian organizations. we're a hybrid. We are except for Director Rafi, I guess we're a hybrid. We are all business organizations or corporations who happen to engage in humanitarian work. So I think that you will see our approach is something that's also hybrid. We focus on humanitarian assistance in the time of a pandemic, in the time of natural disaster. We focus on that, but we also have one eye on business continuity and on business recovery because we take the long-term view that we need to build up the uh, economic resilience, if you will, of businesses. And the only way to build this up is we got to make sure that they not only survive this pandemic, this crisis period, but they come out of it stronger and ready to recover faster. So I think that's kind of the contribution that uh, organizations like ours bring to the table because we're both corporate and we're humanitarian all at the same time. So I think that's one key insight. And the other one that struck me, I think, is what Hans Peter said. Um, selling resilience is a tough job. I mean, it's like he said, it's like selling insurance. Nobody likes to spend on it because you think you never need it. But resilience is a good investment to make. That $1 spent in preparedness and prevention and resilience is a savings can represent savings about $6 or $7 in direct costs later on when a disaster does strike. It also saves a lot of lives. So I think that we need to continue to push this message that resilience is extremely important. So let me leave it at those two insights. One is that we're hybrid. We look at humanitarian plus business recovery. We're looking at the economy and at the crisis situation. And the second is that let's invest in resilience. Let me turn over back to Camille to close the session out. Camille.
Thank you so much, Sir Bill, and thank you to everyone in our distinguished panel. This was really a jam-packed but very insightful session, and I'm sure that all our participants were able to, not only enjoy but take a lot of very valuable insights, not just about logistics but about like resilience in general. Thank you, Sir Bill, for doing that very concise synthesis of everything that we've heard today of us being a hybrid and the importance really of building long-term resilience for every sector, for MSMEs in particular. So it's really not just about responding to the pandemic and it's the challenges it's brought us, but really building a world beyond it where we emerge stronger and more resilient. As we close the session, we just like to call everyone to partner with us and to collaborate with both the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation as well as UBS Foundation. So here on the slide, you will see our website as well as the website for our digital learning platform, iAdapt, which was mentioned earlier as well. So please do visit our website to check out what we've been working on iAdapt. Please set up an account. It's free. And there's a lot of stuff that you could learn about business continuity, family preparedness, even gender-based violence, and other very relevant topics. The email addresses are here as well for the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation if you want to get in touch with us. And if you're interested in any of our other projects, please do reach out. Those are our social media handles as well. So check out our posts. The next is, although it was answered earlier that you can read the Di Matinag comic book on ccup.com.ph. There's a QR code as well here. If you have your mobile device, you can scan the QR code to access the entire comic book for free and maybe get into the adventure yourself. So please do check out Di Matinag, the MSME's Unbreakable Spirit. There is also a bit.ly link here highlighted in red for the evaluation form for this session. We are very happy that you were able to attend and we would like to hear your feedback on how we can improve moving forward. So please take a few minutes to access that link and give us your feedback and answer the evaluations as well. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, for spending a good almost 2 hours with us. And I'd like to just say, stay safe and take care. May I pass you back to Ferosa for her closing?
Well, thank you, Camille and the speakers. I think this has been the most interesting session so far in this HELiX event. So thank you very much, Director Rafi, Sir Bill, Sir Bush, Sir Chris, and Sir Ricky, Mom Janette, Sir Hans Peter, and PDRF colleagues. Again, thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here, and see you in the next session. We still have session tomorrow. And good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rafi. Maraming salamat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lots of work to do, Director Rafi. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Hey, guys. Good job, guys. Excellent work.
Thank you to the staff.
Yep. Staff, excellent job, guys. Camille, Erwin, Joy, Feline. How many of you are Erwin? Who else is here? Rays. Thanks, everybody. Nika, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. Let's try and play some music.